Hello, book lovers. Welcome to the North Grenville Writers Circle YouTube channel, where we celebrate the power of storytelling. In this video series, we're diving into the vibrant literary scene of North Grenville, Ontario, Canada, to bring you 6 interviews with local and regional authors. Please like and subscribe to be notified as each interview is released. Whether you're into gripping fiction or thought-provoking nonfiction, we've got you covered. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's explore some amazing reads. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this online video interview. I'm Pamela Welling, a graduate of the Humber College Creative Book Publishing Certificate Program and the founder of the North Grenville Writers Circle. The Writers Circle is primarily a social learning and writers support group based in Eastern Ontario, Canada. We support and learn from writers of fiction and nonfiction across various genres, from aspiring authors to mid-career writers, whether self-published or traditionally published. Today, I'm delighted to sit down with Heather Racine to discuss her memoir, Breaking the Cycle of Abuse, My Journey from Victim to Survivor, written under the pen name Hannah Reinbeck. Welcome, Heather.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's good to see you again. We haven't
You as well.
met in a while, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start, if it's okay with you, for a couple
Sure.
of reviews on Goodreads. Daniela writes, Hannah wrote the story with charm and grace. She doesn't describe the actual events, she alludes to them. And Cindy wrote, I just wish to go back in time and rescue this tiny little girl so she would not have to go through any of this. Keep a box of tissues handy. You will need them. So if you're watching this, just to let you know, there is some content that could be triggering. So just take care of yourselves. But it's very informative. And I think this is a conversation that we have to have more in society so that we know that this happens, that people have to deal with the repercussions while we're children and then while we're adults as well, and that you're not alone. So I'd like to begin by discussing the various forms of child abuse. Can you elaborate on the different types and more specifically which ones are addressed in your book?
Yes, absolutely. Child abuse comes in various forms, in addition to what's covered in the book, which is physical abuse and sexual abuse, emotional abuse. There's also financial abuse, there's neglect, there's institutional abuse, and exploitation. Each form can have its long-lasting effect on a child's physical and mental health and overall development. And those long-lasting effects are often carried well into adulthood and into future relationships. There's a few statistics that I'm happy to share because they're really quite concerning when it comes to cases of sexual abuse and sexual assault. One statistic from RAIN is as many as 93% of victims of child sexual abuse under the age of 18 know their abuser. That's crazy to me that 93% of people know. Yeah.
Teachers and parents, I think they teach their kids stranger danger, and they're more aware now than in past times, but that's pretty significant, hey?
Yeah, and of every 100 cases of sexual assault, only 6 are reported to the police. And in North America, the statistic there is 1 in 4 women will be sexually assaulted in their lifetime, and for men, males, it's 1 in 6. And to me, those are way too high. That's ridiculous to think that 1 in every 4 women and 1 in every 6 men will be a victim. And 80% of incidents happen at home, which means a majority of those victims, again, know their abuser.
Yeah, that is pretty high. And these statistics, I think since the 90s, they've been coming up with the statistics. And before that, maybe it just wasn't even known or considered a family problem. Or
well, it's tough because a lot of people don't report, and they can't have that data if it's not being reported.
Right. So I'm just going to do a quote from your book by Pamela Leo. She's a family literary activist and author of Connection Parenting. Pamela writes, children need at least one person in their life that thinks the sun rises and sets on them, who delights in their existence and loves them unconditionally. Can you tell us a little bit about people that helped you or tried to help you when you were a child?
Yeah, I can do that. The list is very short, unfortunately. I do love the quote. It definitely resonated, and that's why I sort of put it into that chapter there. But The one person who played an active role and really went above and beyond was my foster mother, Eleanor. I was placed into foster care with her and her family in September of 1987. And that lasted until December of 1992. So from the ages of 9 to 13, I had 5 years of feeling safe, which is obviously something I didn't have prior to that. But I also want to give credit to my two automotive shop teachers, Mr. Miller and Mr. Thiebel, because they were aware of what was happening to a degree. And they kind of sort of took me under their wing, like, the father role models I didn't have. And they were able to help set me up at my first job. So yeah, back then, it was, you had to have your resume, you had to know somebody, get your foot in the door, really had to kind of, pound the pavement, so to speak. You didn't have any of this, just apply online.
Yeah.
That would have been nice. But yeah.
So important to have those two, and to have the people like that for sure. What about
Yeah.
now, in your adulthood? Because obviously this is something that there's a lifelong issues, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's right now it's just it's been my husband Jay. He has been and continues to be the biggest supporter um for whatever I want to do. And he understands when I wrote the book, he was one person that actually edited it and did a full read through. Um so he has a good understanding of, what he's getting into, what he's got me.
Yeah.
But I also have a small peer group that kind of formed, and we call ourselves the coffee club because it just sounds happier than trauma club.
Yeah.
And we try to meet about once a month, depending on people's schedules, just to offer support and to validate and just to be there.
Is that online or in person?
And no, there's an online friendship group on Facebook for our area that we all met through. And one lady had spoke up and said, I wish there was a small sort of side group that we could get together, because there's a lot of us who endured trauma in some manner. Um, and it's just nice to know that there are, peers among you that could offer that support. That because I found that it's people that have been through something similar that really understand what
Yeah.
you're going through, versus talking to somebody who has got no idea. And bless their heart, they try, but they can't
Yeah.
connect. Yeah.
Oh, I understand that. And I guess because people are more able to talk about it, you guys were able to identify that yes, you have a similar background, and
Yeah.
it's a good thing these days, I guess. So,
Yeah.
I'd just like to go back to your book a little bit.
Sure.
In your book, I find you skillfully blend the perspectives of your childhood self with adult reflections, and even to the sense where you're talking about, you're going, while you're writing the book, you're like, oh, okay, you came up
Yeah.
with something. So you can always be learning as you're going through life on what things were about, and how they affected you. We follow your journey from the moment you confided in your mother through the hospital examinations, interactions with the police and the court system, your entry into the foster care system, and the start of counseling, which is interesting to give it from the perspective of a young girl. I found that very interesting. And then you were initially expected for a brief stay of that 5 years
Yeah.
of safety. A brief stay, it turned into 5 years.
Yeah.
Uh, and then your possibility of returning to live with your mother was shattered when it was revealed that she was visiting the abuser in prison.
That's right.
So, and then even later on, she was with somebody else that she didn't want to be around because she had picked another person who wasn't safe.
Yeah.
So you transitioned into an adoption phase where, despite being with your brother, you found yourself feeling isolated and neglected in an overcrowded home, where basically, where you might have been feeling like you're raising yourself. I guess.
That was pretty much it. It was
Yeah.
another foster home that he had. Like, we were when we were initially removed from our home, I went to one and he went to another, because where I went didn't have space for a boy. We were too old to be able to share rooms. And then where he went, it was literally like maybe a 2-minute drive up the road, so he wasn't far. And he went to a foster home that did have room for a boy his age. He was 7, I was 9. So I knew where he was and I could visit him whenever. But it's just, I had been there to visit and it was just chaos. There was too many kids and it felt like they were all just a paycheck. It just wasn't it wasn't conducive to really helping the child sort of decompress and have to deal. And it wasn't a safe place. It was just too much chaos. There were literally 14 people in one house. There were 5 dogs, 4 cats, a rabbit outside, and one of the tenants downstairs had a bat. So it just,
And you were saying that your room wasn't your own, that people could go in there at any time, which is something that's.
yeah, initially when I moved in, I was given like the master bedroom, which would sound great, but it also had a lot of well, Mrs. Smith, it was basically her bedroom. So she had her dresser, her clothes, the closet was still hers. And then one of the younger kids also had a toddler bed in there, even though she didn't use it because she slept with the foster mom. So it's like, yeah, at any point they were just sort of coming and going. And eventually I had a room in the basement, which, yeah, much smaller, but you got people overhead, there's constantly traffic overhead and the stomping and
Yeah,
lots of kids, a lot of toddlers under the age of 5 at the same time. And they were basically just watching each other because nobody wanted to take responsibility for it.
right. So what advice would you give to a foster parent and or caseworkers for a 9-year-old like you who's taken into care?
Oh, so much.
Yeah,
um, it's not a one size fits all situation. A lot of kids get removed for various reasons. Um, so hard to say. I wish I was just listened to and being taken seriously. I know I was 13 at this phase where I went from going from like being a foster kid or ward of the state to being, I guess, adoptable because that was just how they dealt with it. You weren't supposed to be forever in a foster home. That was supposed to be a temporary thing. Um, but when you're 13, you have to have a sense that you kind of know what's good for you. And I recognized where I was. Um, I was happy and I didn't feel, you know, constantly hyper vigilant, which is something I had felt after I had been moved. And it's something I still kind of feel in my adult life sometimes.
yeah,
And where I was definitely helping me to allow me to be myself and feel safe and just be a kid. And when I had moved, it's like I was an instant babysitter because I was a teenager at the house, and it just wasn't at all conducive again to to being in recovery and becoming, I don't know, the best version of myself. I was always just it's hard for an introvert to be in a place where there's constantly 14 people and no one really shows any empathy for your situation. You're just a number.
yeah,
So that was really difficult. So I wish I had been taken seriously. I wish they had listened when I said, I really don't want to move. I like it here. Um, but that wasn't the case. What ended up happening is I didn't even offer my foster mother the chance to be a guardian or a legal guardian, because if she had been asked, she would have done it 100% because she didn't want me to leave, but she didn't feel like she had any control in how they were, um, I guess, how the system worked. She was just sort of following orders. So if she was told, yeah, we have to move Heather, out of here into something permanent, well, oh, okay, I guess I don't really have any recourse for that.
yeah,
So it's really unfortunate they don't have any sort of out of the box thinking for solutions like that.
yeah. That makes sense. If you don't have the people around you that are looking at you as somebody to nurture and to grow, you kind of start looking at your own value and making
Yeah.
up some stuff that's not true that you have to deal with later, right?
It's just, yeah, it just sort of further made the impression that, I wasn't worth it, or
Yeah,
because I mean, at this point, like, like my dad had left early, he wasn't around. My mom obviously made her choices.
yeah,
My grandmother could have done something, but opted not to do anything. So it just, and then, when it had being moved into this other house, it's like nobody cared.
mm,
It's like, okay, well, she's 13, she's self-motivated, she can get herself to school, she doesn't cause any trouble, don't have to worry about her, it's let's worry about everybody else.
yeah,
So I had very little attention paid to me in that house, which,
yeah,
again, just sort of further, makes me feel like, what, I'm just not worth it.
yeah. And then as an adult, you have to tell yourself that's not true.
Yeah.
Like it's their issues. It's got nothing to do with you, I suppose, eh?
Yeah.
So I want to go back to the book again.
Sure.
Um, So you write, one summer evening in 1986, your mom felt compelled to tell you that she had visited a fortune teller at the local fairgrounds. She'd received a warning that the guy she was with now would cause her to lose her kids and she'd never get them back. I didn't know what possessed her to tell me that at 8 years old, but I was scared. And then you write in italics, Mom should have listened. Then within a few months, the man's soon-to-be ex-wife told your mother as you listened in another room that the man wasn't a good man and and tried to tell your mom what he had done to his own daughter. Your mother confronted the abuser, who convinced her that it was all lies. So I just wanted, can you talk about how important it is for people to step in when a child will be at risk, specifically what people can do and what resources are available?
Yeah, I mean, in this situation that you're referring to, it was the ex-wife. Whether they were separated legally, I don't know, but it was at what I knew to be was the ex-wife at the time of my mom's boyfriend, who was my abuser. She actually came to our apartment and just tried to let my mom know, this is who he is. This is what he's done. I'm here to warn you. Your daughter's in danger because this is what's happened. And from my mom's point of view, it seemed like she just went on to figure she's just a jealous person. She just wants to break up this relationship. She just wants her husband back, and she just didn't want to hear any part of it.
Mm.
And it's like, and even though I think in some level she might have been concerned, but it wasn't enough concern. Because while she did confront him and say, "Oh well, your ex-wife was here. This is what had happened." Obviously, he lied about it and said what he had to say to kind of appease her, and it was never discussed or brought up after that. So I really do have to applaud the ex-wife in this case, because she did go above and beyond what most people probably would have done. I think most people tend to look the other way,
Especially
and
back then.
exactly, yeah, because it's like you don't talk about that kind of stuff. That's You don't air your dirty laundry.
Mhm.
And for her to have gone as far as she did at the time as a kid, I didn't really recognize it. But going back through all of my journaling, it's like, oh my God, like
She
that was,
stepped up.
yeah, she stepped up, and it's like good for her. Um, I think it was actually, from what I understand, when it was found out that my mom had been seeing him continuously while he was in prison, my mom believes it was the ex-wife that somehow found out and saw her name on like the visitors list.
Mm.
So whether my mom just wants to blame her because she doesn't want to admit, but that's what I was told. But as far as
But who
how,
cares?
how
Right?
I know it's
Somebody should have raised that, I think, right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, she knew that the ex-wife knew my mom's kids were taken away. She knew, and I think if she did continue to try to step in, still good for her, because it wasn't a good situation. And yeah, it led to more shameful acts from my mom, I guess, because she ended up with the cellmate of the abuser after. So yeah, and then she still wanted to. She had the grand idea that we'd all just live together. Like when I was of age to move back home, we'd all just live together. It's like, yeah, I don't think so.
No, no,
No, are you
no.
serious?
Yeah. But I read, and it's like things that had happened to her in her life. It's not an
Yeah,
excuse, but it's
yeah,
sort of a way to understand, at least even if it's not, I guess.
yeah. And it's like because of the trauma she endured, I would have thought that she would have had more of a like an empathetic side to what I had gone through, and would have been believing what had happened, especially since she had been warned and there were signs and tests
Might
had
have
been done.
might have just normalized it. I don't know.
I think so. I think that's just a generation, and it's no offense to the boomers, but that's just how they grew up. Is you don't talk about it, we don't discuss it, no one needs to know our business,
Yeah.
and if you don't talk about it, then it doesn't exist. It was all about keeping up with the reputation or the perceived reputation of the family,
Yeah.
which it's like we weren't like royalty. So there was nothing that they were really keeping.
Yeah,
But it's important to recognize the signs of abuse, because there are signs if you are really looking, and you know what they are, you'll see them.
yeah.
But we
And
all
to
have a,
stop the cycle of abuse. You
well,
stop it
yeah,
for the kids, and then you gotta make sure that there's a way they can work through it and not do it to the next generation, right?
exactly. And especially for people that have been abused, I find that if they've been abused in any sort of trauma, and they don't seek like medical, like mental professional help, they are the ones who tend to repeat the cycle. And it's been that way with my family. And it's really important to get that help to stop the cycle and to stop, I guess, just passing the buck to the next generation. It's not fair,
Yeah.
but
You wrote about other people who that you had met as children, um, having drugs and alcohol as their way of coping, because if you don't deal with it, it comes out in other ways. So
yeah.
good on you for not, you didn't go down that path. And that's,
Yeah, it certainly, was available, but it's like I just
no,
never wanted to be a part of that at all.
yeah. Okay, so I guess in Ontario, there's a law now in our province to report. It's the local child welfare and child protection services, I think, or just,
Yeah, just in Ontario, it's the law in Ontario to report suspected child abuse and neglect. If you've got a reasonable grounds to suspect that there is harm being done, we all share that responsibility to step up and speak up for that child, because they're not necessarily going to know how to
what,
handle that situation.
is it a legal responsibility for people, things like teachers and principals, and it's more of a moral one for like a neighbor or something, or is it
I'm not sure
someone,
if there's like
yeah.
a fine line, but I know, and most of my references are from the States because that's where I'm from originally. But I know that teachers and doctors, at least had the responsibility if they suspected
Mhm.
that they had to report. Um, and in my case, that's what happened. I went to the hospital for testing, went to appease my mom to prove to her that I wasn't lying. And because it was very obvious there was trauma and things had been done, that, yeah, the doctor's like, yeah, there's obviously something happening here that shouldn't be happening. We have no choice but to call the police, and then they will figure out what to do.
You kind of saved yourself, even though the son of the abuser tried to help you as well.
Yeah,
You did kind of save yourself in a way. So that's something, again, you said, if you know about it, do something, because not all kids do step, step
yeah.
forward, I guess.
Yeah, because I mean, the son of my abuser was a few years older than I was, but again, he must have been, I think, at most maybe 13 while I was 9. So it's like,
Still young.
I don't know what he was expecting to do besides just, let his dad know that he's aware, that he knows what his dad's doing. He
Mhm.
doesn't agree that, but it's like, he couldn't stand up to his dad,
Yeah.
physically, and when you're 13, you kind of like, well, do I go against my parent? Do I speak up against my parent? And what kind of backlash will that have on me? So it's tough, but I think we're all responsible to protect those who don't have a voice.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, you can call the local child welfare and child protective services, or if the danger is immediate, like you could see it happening and you know there's a threat towards a child, you can call the local police. There's loads of resources online. I check locally because there's so many out there. I couldn't possibly list them all.
Mm.
But just for our area in Kempville, we have the victim services leads in Grenville, and we have the assault response care center, and they run out of the Brockville General Hospital.
Right on.
Yeah,
And I think I mean, even if you're not sure, you could probably call and say, this is what I'm suspecting, and you can talk and probably, yeah,
that's the thing too. Is like you at least have like a crisis centers all over the place that you can call and say, this is kind of what I suspect. How should I go about? Do I need to report this, or do I need to get further proof, or can we send someone for like a wellness check?
yeah,
And that just didn't happen in the 80s.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes they didn't think it was something that happened, and if it did, then it was a family issue sometimes.
Well, the family
At
covered it
least in the
up.
70s, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just the next question I have is about your relationship with mother. For a while, with your mother, for a while there, you had managed to um, communicate the occasional social media connection.
Mhm.
So that's your relationship to your mother, but there's also a relationship to you. Your book concludes with a heartfelt letter to your inner child. Can you talk about what inner child work is and how it can be beneficial?
Yeah, that's tricky. It's important work for sure, but trying to explain inner child work is probably going to sound more crazy. Like I've got like multiple personalities. I swear I don't. Um, but for me, what that means for me personally, and maybe it's different for everybody, but the way I identify my inner child is it's the stunted version of myself at 9 years old. Is like she's like, I don't want to say like the inner monologue, but she's definitely the more, I guess, emotional part. She's got a very heavily emotional sort of presence for things like there's a situation that might come up that she might have been triggered. So it triggers me to feel like, why am I all of a sudden just like feeling upset or anxious? Or why am I like really emotional? And the adult's like, what is going on? It's like she kind of like hijacks for a minute to let you know that, hey, I'm still here and this would have bothered me. So I feel like I have to be like the parent to myself and almost reparent myself because I really didn't have much of any parenting happening in my life. Um, so I just it helps to keep me accountable and helps me to sort of recognize what's like the adult responsibility versus maybe what she's reacting to that maybe would have upset her, or there are times where maybe I'm feeling like I'm being just dismissed by somebody who maybe wants an opinion or asks my thoughts and I'm just being talked over, or I'm just being ignored, or they just turn and have another conversation while I'm in mid sentence kind of thing. And just like that infuriates me. But I think part of it is like, yeah, she's like, you know what, that's not cool. And I think, don't know if she's like trying to say, stick up for yourself, advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
But I know that if I don't, that I have, the history of that nobody else would. And
And I
so
think
I guess
inner child work is something that's in the literature too, right? Or
I
something
believe
that you
so.
probably recommend for other people to do as well. So that if you're
Yeah.
triggered and it doesn't make sense intellectually of what's
Yeah.
going on, it's because it's a patterned response of when you were younger, you're having that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got about less than 10 minutes.
Okay.
I just want to move on to you're an ally with the LGBT community.
Sure.
Can you talk about why you are a proud ally?
Yeah, it's a short answer is I support human rights. That's it in a nutshell. But to go into it, I've got three family members who identify as transgender, and for me, it's upsetting for me to see that they feel that they can't live their lives or they're unable to hold jobs because their employers don't recognize or choose not to recognize or choose to discriminate or push them out forcefully, so they have to find new work. I just don't think it's fair. And for me, I went to school at a trade school. I took automotive in high school. So I had 4 years of being in an all male program. And then I went into working at the dealerships, which is also very male dominated, at a time where it wasn't. Like you didn't see too many females working in the dealership. So I know what it's like to be discriminated against or told that I wasn't good enough or that I didn't deserve the same pay or same opportunities. And constantly being passed over for the guy who has got less experience, but because they were the guy, they must have known more.
Yeah.
And it's just infuriating. And so I know that if I feel like a minority in my school or in my workplace, that people of the LGBTQ plus community probably feel very similar. And many of them aren't supported at home. A lot of their parents or siblings don't see them the same. They just don't recognize the pronouns or how they choose to love somebody else,
Yeah.
And I think that people, it's just my opinion, the humans have the right to exist, the right to work, the right to live their lives, and as long as they're not hurting anybody, it really shouldn't bother the majority, So it's just, the people who were gay or lesbian or transgender have been around forever. And it's just, I don't know why inclusion is so hard for people. It should be just as natural as breathing at this point.
And if they just don't even understand it. It's not to get ahead of anybody else. It's to get where they are based on their skills. Like if they're equally, or if they're good at what they do, it doesn't matter who they are.
Yeah.
And it makes, I don't know, Canada's more, we always like to think we're more of a mosaic of people, and
Yeah.
and we're becoming more tolerant, but there's still probably a ways to go. It's
Yeah.
the people that are experiencing it would have to tell us what it's like right now, and how does it hurt us to listen? And for the
Yeah.
same reason, you used to, gender now. I think kids maybe, or girls moving up, don't see it as much as you and I would, based on when we were growing up.
Yeah.
But it informed us on how treating people right maybe is the right thing to do. Do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I took over there for.
That's all right.
So I just wanted to see if you had any book recommendations for anybody who might be interested.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned two in my book as ones that I kind of used to sort of help me through my writing and just processing what I was dealing with. Because when you start journaling, the floodgates open, and it's like you get all this information and memories and flashbacks. It's like, where do I start unpacking all of it? One thing I used, which I don't have a copy of here, was the Sexual Healing Journey, a guide for survivors of sexual abuse by Wendy Maltz.
Sorry, there, phones. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. And then the other one I would recommend that I do have it's called "It Didn't Start with You: How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle" by Mark Wolin. So that's that one there. This one basically kind of goes into when your grandmother is born, she is born with all the eggs she'll ever have, and that includes your mother and you. And so if your grandmother, for example, has endured trauma of any kind, like maybe she was in a fire or something, a really bad fire, it's possible that her trauma will be passed to your mom and passed to you, because it's just these phantom traumas. They don't belong to you, but you somehow feel this, this fear of fire that doesn't make logical sense to you, but you just, are triggered. So it talks about that, which I thought was really interesting, that some things just don't belong to you. So it's good to know how to unpack what's yours and what's not yours.
Oh, that sounds
yeah.
good. Yeah, that's like intergenerational trauma, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just want to talk about, there's a lot of people in the writers group that you and I belong to that are interested in writing a memoir. So do you have any advice? We have 4 minutes.
Okay, yeah, so quickly, the best thing I can do is get consent. You're talking about most likely your family, family events, things that happen, things that are very personal. Get their consent. At the very least, let them know what you're planning to write, or that they'll be at least featured in your book. And if you can't get their consent, change their name. You don't want lawsuits of defamation of character.
Right.
Yeah, that's the biggest piece of advice I've got.
Okay. So before we go, would you mind telling our viewers what the Survivor Psalm means to you and sharing it with our viewers? It was authored by Frank Ochbury, MD.
Yes, actually, thanks for finding the author, because when I obviously found the quote, it was a lot of unknowns, or I couldn't pin down who it belonged to, so I didn't want to misquote somebody. But I guess I'll read it first, and then I will describe what it means for me. So the psalm is: I have been victimized. I was in a fight that was not fair. It was not a fair fight. I did not ask for the fight. I lost. There is no shame in losing such fights, only in winning. I have reached the stage of survivor and am no longer a slave of victim status. I look back with sadness rather than hate. I look forward to hope rather than despair. I may never forget, but I need not constantly remember. I was a victim. I am a survivor. Now I'm emotional. I don't know why.
It's normal.
Things you just get triggered.
Totally normal. It's
but
totally
obviously,
normal.
It resonates. It still does after goodness 7 years since I wrote the book.
Yeah.
So that's why I wrote it. I put it at the very front of the book. If people were going to read that, and the only thing they read from my book, if it resonated, they would be likely to maybe read through the rest of it. And if it doesn't resonate, that's okay. But I found a lot of inspirational quotes, and I opted to put them at the beginning of each chapter. That kind of tells you what the chapter is kind of about roughly, or at least it made sense. It was kind of fitting. So yeah, that's
It's very
so
powerful.
very
Very
triggering
powerful.
at this point. Yeah.
Normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm gonna, we got only a couple minutes left, so we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. Do you have your book there, or I'll just
I do.
right on, right on. It's Breaking
Yeah.
the Cycle, My Story from Victim to Survival. Thank you very much for
Yeah.
talking with us
Well,
today.
thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.